It's the Kpopcast, a K-pop podcast. I am DJ Peter Lowe, a K-pop DJ, and I'm joined by my recurring show host, Supermatic. What's going on, Supermatic?
What's up, everybody? How y'all doing out there?
For this episode, we're going to take a deep dive, a deeper look into the GOT7 Flight Log Trilogy.
Ooh, ooh.
We're going to do a deconstructed episode. We're going to go into the meanings, the narrative story, the linear story behind the Flight Log Trilogy. But I think, we can break this down quite simply, quite easily. 5 members of GOT7, they die in a car crash. Jin Young is the only one to live, but he lives in a coma. And within this coma, he makes a choice to live or die. He chooses the choice of death. And the 5 deceased members of GOT7 wake him up. They pull him to the mortal realm, preventing him from passing on. And Jin Young, he wakes up. One last thing on this is that Yugyeom and Jin Young are the same person throughout this entire narrative story. And the moral of the story is that life is worth living even when your friends have carried on and passed on. And I think that with that, that's GOT7 Deconstructed.
Sounds good. Let's go home.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you can follow us on social media. I'm at DJ Peter Lowe. You're at Supermatic, and be sure to tune in next week.
Maybe on second thought we should dive a little deeper into this.
Well, I think we explained it quite simply, quite clearly. But no, okay. To your point, Matt, where should we start?
Maybe for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with the GOT7 saga, or even for those who are but don't really know where things are happening, a rough outline of the timeline of how everything unfolds in the Flight Log saga, maybe?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe before we go into how it unfolds, let's explain how one should be looking at the film. So overall, a lot of people have been looking at Never Ever as a standalone piece, right? A standalone story.
True.
But overall, you got to look at it as part of a trilogy. And within that trilogy, there were 3 key trailers that were shown, right? Which explain really the story. You can tell that JYP put a lot of money, a lot of resources into explaining what the story was behind the Flight Log Trilogy through these trailers produced by AR Films. The linear story speaks through metaphors and symbolism, and it offers a few literal clues to show us the difference between what is real and what isn't. So I think it also takes a number of filmography cues from Inception.
Those horns.
Yeah. Well, let's break it down. Let's go through the linear story for what happens in GOT7's Flight Log Trilogy. Starting from the very first teaser trailer that we see for Fly, it starts off with a car ride experience from all the boys, all the dudes together in a car. Yep. And we notice that Jin Young himself is noticeably separate, distant from his other members, but he's still engaged, and they're engaging him, right? So we see, which member is it? Who's the one with the camera?
Oh, that would be Jackson.
Jackson. Yep. So Jackson, he's chronicling the entire experience. One detail I think is critical to note, and this is for a proof point to the reality of the teaser trailer, is if you look at the camera and you look in the bottom left, you can see that there is a moving timeline. So it's actively being recorded. So the guys are all together. They're in their car experience, and we see Jin Young kind of lean over. He's going to sleep, and we see so obvious, they've made the metaphor, the symbolism so obvious. He leans over, and you see the outline of the bird. So Jin Young leaning over to the bird because, guys, the bird, the parakeet, is Jin Young. And that was, I think they underscored that symbol throughout the entire thing. We also see that the cloud-colored parakeet inside the van itself.
Oh, yes, we do.
And I take that parakeet to mean that is the spirit. That is your soul. In particular, it's Jin Young's soul for this entire Flight Log experience. Again, this is sort of the prequel. This is sort of laying the stage for the entire trilogy. This is the reality when they're all together. All right, so they're all together in this car ride, in this experience, going to this destination. And I want to say that that's the reality. They're all together in a car, and something happens. Now, they don't have to spell it out so obviously for us, but something happens on that car expedition, on that car ride. We later see in that teaser trailer where all the members are, going on their travel, their trip, and some of the members, more specifically 5 of the members, start flying. And I think we see this also reinforced throughout the series, that this act of flying is this passage of passing on. It's dying. It's that act of becoming an angel because you've died in a natural way. These are saints. What are GOT7 fans called again?
Oh, I got sevens.
So I got sevens. These are your boys. They become saints because they have lived a perfect life. So they carry on. But we also see a dream sequence, right? Or at least a sequence with Jin Young in the bedroom. So, Super Mac, what did you take that to mean?
So we see Jin Young in the bedroom, and again, this is still within the trailer for the
That's right.
Departure album.
Yep.
And it is evidently after the trip, or we can guess.
Yep.
Jin Young wakes up, and he's in the bed of what looks like a hotel room or some sort of bedroom.
A bedroom, I think.
a bedroom.
I mean, they've got Nirvana posters on the wall, so I presume it's a bedroom.
And then he wakes up and he notices the other members, like his fellow members of GOT7, are all, again, horsing around doing what they do. And Jackson is still going around with that video camera and he's documenting everything. But what's noticeable is that he seems to just completely walk by Jin Young, like not even aware that he's there almost. And then there is a key moment where Jackson turns the video camera going into kind of like selfie mode to document him and the other guys together. But not only is Jin Young not included in that, but if you look closely, there's only 5 members.
That's right.
Noticeably missing is also Yugyeom. We'll dive into that later.
Yeah, but another point, remember earlier we pointed out in the car ride, the camera reel is rolling.
Yep.
You see the time rolling. In the camera in the bedroom, it's still.
Yep.
It's a memory, guys. It's not moving forward. This was something that happened, or rather, it's a recollection of these members being together. Let's not forget, there's also that parakeet once again in the bedroom, reinforcing this idea that this is the spirit, this is the soul, remembering this moment with these members together. So that's a very strong clue that these 5 members have passed on, and that they are a memory, but rather a memory and not with Jin Young.
Yep, absolutely. Another key point to reinforce that as well is that when Jin Young shifts his gaze over and he looks at the mirror in the bedroom, it is at an angle where clearly you should be able to see both Jin Young and the other members of GOT7, but the only reflection you see is just Jin Young himself, not the other members.
Yeah.
So clearly something happened.
Yeah, these guys are no longer with us in the mortal world. So I think that pretty much sums up the prequel, right, for the flight or departure chapter of the Flight Log Trilogy. Is that right, Matt?
I mean, for anyone who may not have seen it, basically what we see towards the end of the trailer that is also, again, re-included in the music video for Fly is these scenes of Jin Young on top of a building, and he is attempting to achieve flight by what we can only interpret as committing suicide.
Right. So he's up at the top of a building. Right. I want to underscore again, guys, like this entire filmography takes a lot of inspiration and cues from the movie Inception. And in that movie Inception, the way you make it from one plane to the next was to go through these like kickbacks or kicks, a way to like sort of wake up in each tier. In between the trailer for Departure or Fly and the Fly music video itself, I think, we can expect that the car crash happened. These guys are on a road trip somewhere. It doesn't show it obviously, but something must have happened to these members. When we get to Fly, what happens at the beginning of that music video, Supermatic?
We see the members of GOT7. They've stopped off somewhere. Like they've parked the van. Jin Young is still inside the van, but then all the other members are outside at some sort of like basketball court, or there's a basketball hoop set up, and there's also like a Ferris wheel in the background. The other members are just horsing around and whatnot, like tossing a baseball and glove, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Young Jae is floating in the air, and all the other members are like, "Whoa, what's going on?"
That's right.
And that basically kicks off all the other members of GOT7 in some way getting their own way of achieving flight. They slowly all lift off into the air and they're flying.
Yeah, so again, this idea that flying represents passing on, becoming an angel.
We see Jin Young in the car, but the question here is that if Jin Young was inside of the van while all these other members are passing on, then how does Jin Young go from the van to being on top of a building?
Right. So my overarching theory to this is that Jin Young was in a coma. Going into this car crash, he slips into this car crash-induced coma. And like we saw in Inception, we saw multiple tiers and into this dream world-like state. When he's in this coma state, he has a choice, a conscious decision to make, whether he wants to carry on living, whether or not he wants to wake up, or whether or not he wants to fly. And to fly, again, means to die and to join your friends. What Jin Young doesn't realize is that when he makes that choice to die, he does not fly, because that was a choice he was making rather than fulfilling his destiny. So he falls, and we see the other members of GOT7 flying. Not all of the members. Which 5 members do we see?
We see pretty much everyone from Jackson to Mark, JB, Bam Bam, Young Jae, but also noticeably absent aside from Jin Young himself is Yugyum.
Yugyum, yeah, that's right. So 5 members are flying and 2 are absent from the experience. So that, I think, pretty much sums up the flight experience, right?
Yep.
I mean, there's a few other vital clues. So within Fly, we see the bedroom again that we saw in the teaser trailer.
Yes.
That's right. And we see 5 birds flying. Again, it's this idea of the birds, or rather these 5 members who have passed on, carrying on into the afterlife. They're ascending up. Okay, so what happens after Fly?
We move on to the second chapter, which is Flight Log Turbulence. And starting off with the trailer for Turbulence, it again centers around Jin Young because he's the main character throughout this whole saga. He is on a flight, and we see him on this plane, very stoic, in his seat, like a good passenger. But the other members of GOT7 that we can easily mistake as actually being there on the flight as well are horsing around again together. You know, they're hitting each other with pillows, they're throwing stuff at each other. There is also some noticeable continuity between this and the first installment, because we see one of the members, I believe it was Bam Bam, who got drawn on.
That's right.
Yes, that happened in the car ride during the trailer for Departure.
Yeah. One comment I'd like to make about that, they drew a snake on him. I mean, if this happened in the real world, it'd probably be male genitalia on his face, but they had to keep it PG for the K-pop fans. But yeah, keeping that continuity going in terms of preserving that memory and carrying that forward. So this is a memory. They're not actually in the plane, are they?
Nope. Or at least that would be our best guess, because what happens further on into the trailer for Turbulence is that the seatbelt lights come on, which are the ones that are warning, like, oh, we're about to experience turbulence, please buckle in.
We hit turbulence.
Yep. Jin Young, feeling concerned and worried, he attempts to unbuckle himself so he can get the other members of GOT7 to calm down and also buckle in.
This is a very real memory projection for him.
Yes. But at that moment, the flight attendant comes over and tells him not to unbuckle himself, just stay seated.
고객님, 안전벨트 착용해주세요.
Because what are you doing, kid? Like, you're supposed to stay seated. The flight is going through turbulence.
Yep.
Right. So why didn't the flight attendant tell these other kids riding around to sit down?
Maybe because they're not actually there.
That's right.
Ooh.
That's right. And I think that's pretty clear, right?
Mhm.
I mean, why would they have, again, the same drawing on Bam Bam's face?
Yes.
Why would they carry the camera around just like as they did in the bedroom and as they did in the car? Right? I mean, it's preserving that memory.
Mm-hmm.
And that memory isn't in action. The only thing that we know was in action was when that camera, that recording was actually rolling forward.
Yep.
And we saw that in the trailer for Departure. Okay, so what happens after that? So the attendant tells him to sit down, right?
The flight experiences turbulence, very, very bad and rough turbulence, to the point where we see the lights flickering, they go off, and then we see these gas masks come down, and the flight attendant, who herself is still standing, rushes over and forcibly, or at least like it looks forcibly, puts the mask on Jin Young, and then all of a sudden, after a brief blackout, we see the plane has crashed.
Yeah.
And Jin Young is being resuscitated
through a mask
by a couple of paramedics.
Yeah. And I think that's another key theme, another key symbol that we'll see throughout the entire trilogy. So this act of breathing, of taking in the breath, is a way of bringing you back to the mortal realm. It's maybe what preserves your mortality, this act of breathing. So we see it in the gas mask from the plane, as well as in the resuscitation from the landing site.
Yes. What is also noticeable is that at the very end of the trailer for Turbulence, as Jin Young is waking up, he is trying to take in his surroundings because he doesn't know what just happened. And then when he looks over, like kind of over his shoulder, and he rolls over, we see what he sees, which is the camera that Jackson had in the Departure trailer.
That's right.
And the camera itself, if you look at the screen, it's showing the other members of GOT7 there. But then I actually didn't. Did you see if the time was rolling, if it was still? Because I didn't see that.
Honestly, I just see that as the memory.
Yeah. But
plain and simple, right? Like that was the memory of his friends. They're not actually with him. It's just that recording.
Yeah. So again, the camera itself will also be an important tool or motif throughout this whole saga.
Yeah. Okay. So he lands, and we see this at the end of the trailer, and as well as at the beginning of Hard Carry.
Yes.
There's two notable wrecks. What are they?
There's the plane itself, which is, of course, the flight that Jin Young was on.
Yeah.
But then there's also the car in the background, which at some points is on fire or is upside down. Again, representative of the very easy-to-assume car crash that happened, which claimed the lives of the other members of GOT7.
Because, look, remember that they were flying. They were in flight. So where the heck did the car come from?
Yes.
It had to come from the real experience. And this merging of the car and the plane is the merging of those two metaphors together.
Exactly.
Right. The first scene that we see at the beginning of Hard Carry is with all the members of GOT7 standing upright, vertically up, except for one, and that's Jin Young.
Yep.
In the car, upside down.
Yep.
Clearly meant to show something, that he's not like the others, because he is the survivor, probably of that car crash, and he's in the wreckage of the car.
Yep.
Recapping from Fly, we saw members being lifted up, departing from the mortal realm to the afterlife, and we saw Jin Young making the choice to fall. I see the fall, the actual act of falling, being this passage of him trying to attempt to fly. Now, how does one fly nowadays?
You gain wings.
Yeah. Right, but through a plane.
Oh,
right?
yes, through a plane.
Yeah, so, you're the one who brought this up to me. So what does a plane mean to you?
All right, so what the plane meant, at least as far as I took it, is that Jin Young, again, he's going through this grief or this struggle. He wants to be with his friends again. So after he has attempted to achieve flight, which was by jumping off the rooftop, this plane, I took it to kind of symbolize what should be his ascension to heaven. But, of course...
Well, his attempt.
Or his attempt to ascend to heaven. But as you touched on, since he made the choice to consciously take his own life, that's why the plane experienced turbulence, and instead it crashed down into what was it, like some kind of purgatory almost?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, he attempted to fly, but he hit turbulence.
Yes.
So he crashed and he fell.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see water
Yes.
in hard carry, and also the flames are very present.
Mm-hmm.
I take it to mean that this is hell.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So he fell because he chose the act of committing suicide. That's seen as a sin in a lot of, Christian, biblical, literary sense. That
yes.
it's a scene like, well, if you choose to commit suicide, that's an act worthy of sending you to hell.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going down into, this is the fall. This is the middle chapter of the Flight Log Trilogy, where he goes through that descent. And he falls into water.
That's right.
And as I'm interpreting this, the water can mean a couple things, but I see it as nothingness for all the souls. So they fall into this ocean, this sea, this vacuum where you cannot breathe. Remember?
That's right.
Breathing being this act of resuscitating, bringing you back to the mortal realm. The water is the death. It is the sea of all the meaningless souls who were not able to become angels.
Nice.
All right, so Jin Young falls.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when he falls?
He is rescued by the other members of GOT7.
That's right. But how many other members?
Again, the key number here, which is 5.
5, right.
Yep.
So when we look at Jin Young in the water, we see 5 other members dive into the water, because those are the 5 spirits, as I take it, or rather the 5 angels who have carried on, who are there to save the bro in the spirit world, in the afterlife.
That's right.
So what else do we see in hard carry?
So one other noticeable theme or motif that we see, which is a carryover from the Fly music video and from the Departure saga, is this parakeet, which, Peter, you touched on as being the symbol of Jin Young himself. Because
his spirit.
Yes, his spirit. Because we see this parakeet present in a section of the hard carry music video where there's this back and forth shifting scenes between Young Jae and JB, 2 other members of GOT7, and they are important to pay attention to here in this section, particularly because, one, Young Jae is the one who approaches the cage that we see the parakeet trapped in, and Young Jae ends up opening the cage, taking the parakeet out, and then as he cups it in his hands, he slowly lets it free and lets it fly off. Young Jae is acting as the liberator of this parakeet.
Yeah.
This is important to note because later on in the hard carry music video, we see Young Jae taking a sledgehammer to the box that Jin Young is trapped inside of to try and rescue him as well. So Young Jae is portrayed here as the liberator of Jin Young's soul, his spirit.
Yeah. And one might even interpret this like he was the first to dive in.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if that means that he was actually the one who literally, in this whole car crash, this car dive experience, he was the one who literally saved him and sacrificed himself in the process. That could be a possible interpretation. But I think the more critical, more important one to take away from this is that this angel decides to release him.
Yes.
From this afterlife.
The other member that we also see, of course, is JB, and we see him with these same floating trees, but we see him both with the trees alive when they're very lush and green.
Yeah.
And then we see him with these trees behind him when they're brown, wilted, and dead.
Yeah.
So we agreed that was an interpretation or representation of how he was living, and then he died.
Yeah. I think that's likely. And I think it's funny to note that when I was watching GOT7 deconstruct their own music video for hard carry, they said like, oh, this must be important because of, well, they were green here and now they're brown. What does the brown mean? Well, he's passed on. Yeah. He's gone. He's matured.
Indeed. It's worth noting also because JB himself, he was the driver of the van all the way back in the trailer for Flight Log Departure. So it connects interestingly in a way because, again, JB being the driver of the car, who knows, maybe it might have been his irresponsibility that caused the accident. Who knows? Yeah,
or maybe that, they got into an accident, but he sacrificed his own life to try to save Jin Young.
Very true. Yes.
in the literal linear timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we know that Jin Young is at the precipice of being cast into the abyss with his soul, right? Going into this hell, as well as dying completely, right? And we've already shown that the way people die in this trilogy is by being lifted, by flying. So we see Jin Young himself flying, but what happens?
So Jin Young is being lifted, or he's kind of levitating on his own. Seems as if he's ready to finally fully pass on, but then at the last second we see all these other hands come up on his body and they pull him down, and these hands belong to the other members of GOT7. The other five members, yes. As if their spirits are all saying like, nope, it's not time for you to pass on yet. Get back down here to the mortal world.
The angels of his former brothers are keeping him alive.
Yes.
And that's why I think we see the resuscitating, right, in the hard carry music video. Because maybe Jin Young isn't completely with it because he's seeing these mixed metaphors between a car and an airplane burning around him. But he's being brought back to the real world. We've seen one construct with Jin Young in the water for hard carry.
Yes.
This is the fall, but then we move on to the next chapter.
We get to part 3.
Okay, so what happens in the trailer for Never Ever, or Arrival?
So for the trailer for Arrival, and again, I just have to shout out, it is a beautiful and aesthetically pleasing trailer. But the key here is that we see Jin Young, and he basically wakes up on a beach. He has washed up on a beach. We agreed that this beach and the water kind of represents the purgatory in a sense, yes?
Because don't forget, guys, like the filmmaker, AR Films, or getting the director's name, but he loves Inception.
Yes.
Right? And remember what happens in Inception when Leonardo DiCaprio like wakes up on the beach?
Yes.
Right? That's after having been falling down to like the lowest level of the dream world of what is it? What's the limbo? There we go.
Limbo.
He falls down into limbo. And that limbo, he realizes something.
Yes.
So what are the words that appear on the screen when he's in limbo, in purgatory?
He names off some of these different elements, I guess we could call them. He says things like nature, air, wind. Then he says water.
Actually, I took that to mean that was actually those initial elements. I took actually to mean the voice of the director.
Oh.
But then later, after going through all those elements, then we see Jin Young wash up on the beach. Right? What does he say when he's on the beach?
Nothing? Or
he realizes he failed.
Yes, there we
right?
go.
So he failed, right? Because he jumped off the building.
Yes.
He made the decision, well, I'm going to try to fly. He falls. So he fails. He doesn't connect with his brothers. He also dies, right? So he goes into hell, and his brothers bring him out of that because he goes into hell because he made that choice to die.
Yes.
And he failed there, right? And when he failed, when he was in that trapped container of the water, he was, and this is the other part that he says on the beach, he was nothing.
Ah,
right?
That's right.
So he becomes one with the ocean, one with all the other souls who did not yet, or make it to become an angel.
Yeah, that's right. He says something along the lines of, I don't exist anymore.
That's right.
Like that. Yes.
That's right. So he's realizing this in this purgatory washed up state. What else do we see in the trailer?
Well, right after that, when he acknowledges, or at least as the text shows, Jin Young is thinking or saying to himself, like, I no longer exist, I have failed, I'm nothing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we see him being resuscitated back to life via a defibrillator, and it's the same scene that we see in the Never Ever music video where he wakes up on this hospital bed.
Yeah. We also actually, to call it out, they do it actually in every single chapter.
Yes.
In Fly, you actually see him wake up. I think they did that earlier on in Fly to show that he does eventually wake up and he does eventually get back into the mortal realm. They do it again in Hard Carry when he gets resuscitated, right? So that act of breathing again, being brought back, breathing the air and becoming immortal life again, right? We also see him in the trailer up on the mountain, right?
Yes.
So what happens there?
So he's walking along, like, up on a mountain that's like very snowy. And he is realizing these things, or he's saying to himself things along the lines of like, oh, usually when people fail, they just give up. They don't challenge themselves. But I am not afraid to fail anymore, or something like that.
That's right.
Basically, he just says that, he's ready now. And he realizes that he no longer has to be afraid because he now realizes that he's always had his friends with him.
Yeah.
That they were always there with him.
Yes, yeah. And we see him looking at them, and he's sort of like crying as he's looking at them. There is sort of a memory, right? And these guys are all playing up on the snowfield, up on this high mountaintop, as if it's the closest intersection one can get between flying and being alive, right? So you're getting like as high as you can to connect with those in the heavens and those who are still living. And he's crying, remembering that, these guys, they're living on in the afterlife. They're the angels looking over me.
Exactly.
So he knows that he can carry on because he's strong, because he's got these guardian angels.
And if anyone is wondering how that is reinforced, or like what exactly helps to boost that theory, is the fact that, again, we pointed out earlier, Jin Young has actually always had the camera on him, which Jackson originally used to film and document their trips and their times together.
Right.
Since they passed on, we can take it to mean that Jin Young has kept this camera on him, so in a way he has kept the memory of his friends with him.
Yeah, they stay with him. Both in the literal sense and more in the philosophical, spiritual sense. Then Never Ever begins, right?
Yes.
So what happens in Never Ever?
We see a lot of the same imagery that we have seen from the previous videos, especially again from Hard Carry. They pretty much carried over to Never Ever these scenes of Jin Young being trapped in 1, a glass box, 2, in a car, and then 3, underwater. And we see Jin Young trapped underwater in the car as well. But there are some notable things to point out in the Never Ever MV as well, such as we see the car going off a bridge, crashing, and it crashes into the water.
Again, Inception.
Yes.
Guys, you have to see this film if you haven't already. Inception, there is a scene where everyone's in this car or this bus, right? And it goes off a bridge, and they go through another leap in the dream world, and they're able to go through multiple layers, and this entire movie happens within the length of the car going off the bridge and falling into the water.
Yep.
Same thing happens here. So
pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, we see the car
yeah.
crashing into the water, and then as that scene ends, particularly, what is notable to pay attention to is that on top of the car, on the roof, we see JB.
Yeah.
And again, what does this mean? Well, he was the driver of the car originally that got into the accident, so it all connects back.
Yeah. So again, the car being the very literal passage of time, the very literal linear story of what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
What's in the car?
Foliage.
Foliage.
We see all this foliage, these plants, this symbol of life.
That's right.
This green, lush nature living.
So let's go back really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, for the teaser for Arrival, we saw the narrator or the booming Inception horns calling out the different elements. First was nature.
Mm-hmm.
Second was water and wind and flight.
Yep.
And then we go into a bird.
Mm-hmm.
But nature, why did the narrator call out nature?
Nature is a symbol of life, right?
That's right. That's right. And we saw this previously with Hard Carry, with the trees. At the beginning of Never Ever, remember, the bird is the spirit animal.
That's right.
of Jin Young.
Mm-hmm.
The very beginning of Never Ever, what is the bird in? It's in the foliage.
Yeah, it's in the foliage. That's right.
Yeah, it's perched in nature. So it's showing that this is the arrival of the bird. So it's arrived in the mortal world. It's in nature. So it's living.
There you go.
In the car, where's Jin Young?
He was always in the back seat.
That's right. But he's surrounded
by foliage.
Because he's alive, guys. Everyone else who's in the car isn't, surrounded by it because they're not living.
Yep.
What else happens in Never Ever?
We also see again another repetition from the Hard Carry MV where Young Jae is the one who is standing outside of this glass box or the construct that Jin Young is trapped inside of. And Young Jae again takes it upon himself to grab a hammer and break this glass, this construct that Jin Young is trapped in, and free Jin Young, acting again as a liberator.
Right. But in this case, so in Hard Carry, Jin Young was in water.
Yes.
right? Because he was in hell, right? So he's liberated by young Jay then. He's also liberated by young Jay from the spirit animal, the bird, being taken out of the cage.
Yes.
So why is he taken away from nature, right? Because nature is life, right? Well, the way I see it, and tell me what you guys think, but the way I see it is that Jin Young was still isolated
That's right.
from his members.
There you go.
And so breaking through that was saying like, hey, you can still join us, you know, that you're not separated from us just by being alive. So what happens after that?
We shift forward to this scene where we see Yugyeom noticeably, and the things that he is dressed kind of more darkish, kind of emo. We see him wearing a choker. And this is where you and I developed a theory that we're about to touch on, because what's noticeable with this scene is that Yugyeom is walking through this hospital hallway, and then there's this key
before
pan.
he even gets to the pan, right? He's talking about everything in past tense. All his lyrics are like, this was, you know, the choice I made, no longer am I going to do this.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
And then it pans.
It pans, and the camera takes us across this pillar, and then when we get to the other side, all of a sudden it's not Yugyeom, it's Jin Young.
Yeah.
And then we see Jin Young walk up, and he puts his hand on this little square glass pane window where he's looking into the ER, the emergency room, and it's kind of a
he's
symbolism.
sort of speaking to it as if it's happening.
Yes,
at the time.
because he is looking at himself on the operating table, or on the
he's
the
realizing
table.
he's coming to that epiphany.
Yes.
Right? But the whole point of that pan is to show that continuity of character.
Yes.
The same person from the far future and the person in the present. Or, I mean, depends on how you want to look at it. Like, you know, the person in the present and the person in the past, depending on which vantage point you're looking at.
Yeah.
It's funny because you look at the behind the scenes footage of this music video, and these two guys were talking about like, oh, it was so important to the director that we had this scene, that we do it right.
Yep.
So this meant a lot to the director. The director was trying to tell us something.
Yep.
With the continuity of having this single pan going from Yugyeom to Jin Young. We also see Jin Young on the
table,
on the
or the bed, the hospital bed.
The hospital bed.
Yes.
And we have Yugyeom looking through the window also, kind of over his shoulder, as if it was behind him.
Yes.
Like this is something that happened in the past, and he's reflecting upon what previously happened.
Because taking it from the omniscient point of view, like from the camera, when us as the audience watching this music video, when you're looking in to the operating room from the outside, we see it over the shoulder of Yugyeom. But then when we're looking from inside the operating room to the outside, it's Jin Young with his hand on the glass.
Yeah. Right.
So it's again, that duality.
Yeah.
One more noticeable motif or theme that we also see in Never Ever is that there is this scene towards the end where we see Bam Bam, and he's wearing a noticeable gas mask or some kind of breathing mask. And again, as we've been pointing out, breathing or air mask or oxygen masks have been another key symbol throughout this whole Flight Log saga.
Yeah.
And then we see Bam Bam with his own kind of custom oxygen mask, and he's in this room with all these like statue busts that also have these masks on them. And I believe that what we agreed upon is that that's just another way of symbolizing how breathing, or like that oxygen, that air, represents being alive, or like being able to breathe is the same as being able to live. Like, obviously
it's a sign of your mortality.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what they were trying to convey with Bam Bam, honestly. I mean, like he's got a very, you know, fierce look, and he's got fleshed out white hair,
and also those blue contacts.
Yeah, so I don't know if he was like on life support or something. I don't know.
I mean, if you guys have any idea out there, then heck, let us know.
Yeah, that's the one piece I haven't been able to figure out with this entire trilogy.
Yeah. All you I Got Sevens out there, if you guys have any plausible theories that you strongly believe in as far as Bam Bam and the mask goes, then feel free to tell us.
Yeah. Okay, so let's quickly run through the chronology, right?
Yep.
So at the very beginning, we have all the members on the car together. They die in a car crash except for Jin Young. Jin Young is possibly saved by JB. You know, maybe JB was alive and sacrificed himself to save him. This car crash could have been pulling off of a bridge and falling into the water, being both a literal sense of sea and also where the souls go who have committed suicide or who have done sin. Those who did die right away became angels. They lifted, they flew. Jin Young himself, in this coma state from being in the car crash, he decides in the coma that he wants to die to join his brothers. His brothers say, no, don't do that. They bring him back to reality, and the breath of life is brought back into him.
Yep.
And Never Ever is kind of him reflecting on the entire experience. And we see that through the later version of himself with Young.
Yep, exactly.
I think it's cool how we can look at each of these in terms of the different elements outlined in the teaser trailer for Arrival. So Fly being air, Hard Carry being water, and Never Ever being nature.
Yeah.
I mean, these are just the poetic ways that the director was trying to tie it all together. The parakeet, the bird, is the spiritual representation of Jin Young's soul being carried through this entire linear journey.
Yeah.
And the bird, goes through the different metaphors rather than the actual experience itself. The plane, again, was not an actual plane experience, but rather him attempting to fly but hitting turbulence.
Yep.
Well, that's it for GOT7. How did we rate this song? What did you think of the concept overall for Never Ever?
Well, initially when we were going to do our original Daebak or not for this, I remember we spoke and we both were mostly in agreement about how concept-wise it seemed a little all over the place. But that was because you and I were also looking at it as a standalone. But
That's
then when
right.
we connected all the dots and we realized how it ties into the whole Flight Log saga, I myself, I can definitely say I gained a lot more appreciation for Never Ever.
Yeah.
But that being said, looking at it through our lens and reviewing Never Ever itself as its own release, I still really like the concept. I mean, even though Never Ever may not be as coherent as some other MVs out there are, or they may not explicitly show things, it's kind of fun when we as audience members and viewers are able to interpret it in our own way.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, for me as a personal taste, I like it when we are, or I kind of like it when we are left to our own interpretations of how we take things.
Yeah, and I think, other people will also review this, right? And they'll come in with their own other separate interpretations of this. My critique, however, is that, remember last week we were going to start recording, we were going to just start doing an episode right on GOT7, Never Ever, and we're going to say all those things that you just mentioned, like, oh, it's kind of all over the place, what the hell does this mean? Let's, like, there's no congruity to it, right? Well, that's because we didn't have the full context behind the other two music videos, not only the other two music videos, but the teaser trailers for the other two concepts, including the third teaser trailer for this one. Like, you couldn't enjoy the concept of Never Ever by itself.
That's right.
Right? I'm sorry to start like a fan war, but I think BTS did that. I'm sorry. I think that they did that with Spring Day, honestly.
Yeah.
And that was really nicely self-contained. And while you're able to get more of that theme of maturity with the whole BTS arc, GOT7 required the story arc of the entire Flight Log experience. Does that mean more? I think it did, at least for us, right? Like, I got more of it. But if you're just jumping into the scene for GOT7, like, it's kind of overwhelming that it alienates you even from people who regularly cover K-pop.
Yeah.
You have to, it's a whole effort to go through that entire story again to get the concept.
That's right.
And to look for the clues that are not obviously stated.
To their point, I kind of just had a thought strike me, is that while we're comparing how GOT7 did this whole Flight Log saga compared to BTS with Spring Day, BTS with Spring Day, it did have tie-ins that related back to the Most Beautiful Moment in Life saga and chapters that they did, but at the same time, Spring Day on its own, to its merit,
it was able to contain itself, right?
Yes, and what I realized about that is that for Spring Day, they drew heavily on a work of literature, which was Those Who Walk Away from Romulus, this novel. Whereas with GOT7, for this whole Flight Log saga, I don't know if they necessarily drew anything from literature, more as they relied on straight imagery and symbolism.
Yeah.
And then again, for Never Ever, as you pointed out, with the inspiration from a film, which is Inception.
Inception, you're right.
So it's interesting how you can see the difference in the directions that they went based upon which source material or source of inspiration they were drawing from.
Yeah, and I mean, they could, GOT7, for all we know, could be referencing a novel that I'm just not immediately familiar with.
True.
Right? And maybe I'm just not getting that reference, but there could be a reference that they are making.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not called out in a very obvious way.
When I'm looking at the concept, one other thing I do have to shout out, though, setting aside this whole storyline saga, the whole Flight Log Trilogy, this journey that we've been taking on as viewers, when it comes to GOT7, you always got to shout out the choreography as well.
Yeah.
I've been watching the choreography version of the music video, which
Right.
just dropped within a day or two, and it's amazing. Like, the thing for me is that I tried looking into it, and unfortunately I was not able to find out if there was one particular choreographer or if there's a team, but whoever it is that's responsible for GOT7's choreography, shouts out to you, man, because you always manage to give each comeback and each song its own distinctive style, but at the same time...
Wasn't it the Kinjas who did this?
Well, there was two of the Kinjas that did hard carry, and to be honest, I would not be surprised if they had Kinjas again help out for Never Ever.
Okay.
But whether or not they did, I mean, it would be cool if they did consult two of the Kinjas again. But for Never Ever itself, I mean, I can definitely say safely, I want to learn this dance.
Yeah.
It's really nice, really tight. They've got
Right.
good formation, so
Yeah.
good job, because even though it's distinct enough to separate it from Hard Carry and Fly and the previous work, it still carries that same signature GOT7 style and that feel when you watch it. So good job on the choreography.
Okay.
That all being said, diving into my ratings
Yes.
for the concept.
Concept, this is your first time listening to the Kpopcast. What is the concept? The concept is inclusive of...
The music video itself, the storyline, what the idea was, and as well as what we just touched upon, looking at choreography, if there is any.
Yeah.
We take into account the styling, how the members look,
Yep.
outfit changes, how they correlate with the concept.
The entire brand.
Yes.
The brand, the story, the dance. Yeah.
Like the full package of what the song and the music video represent.
Right.
So for me with Never Ever, again, it's kind of interesting for me to think about it because we're scoring Never Ever as a standalone for its concept. But
Yeah.
we just did this deep dive of how it connects
Well,
to the
because
Flight
you
Log
can't
saga.
isolate it, right?
Yes.
Never Ever can't really stand on its own without knowing the full details of the entire Flight Log Trilogy.
Yep.
So,
So that said, I chose to look at it this way.
uh-huh.
Comparing Never Ever and how well it does in terms of making the storyline clear compared to Hard Carry and to Fly, as far as which of the three is easy enough for us to understand and kind of get a best idea of what's going on. Never Ever admittedly was kind of in the middle or towards the bottom for me compared to, I'd say, maybe Fly.
Yeah.
'Cause-
No, I completely agree.
Between these three, I feel like the Fly was the strongest MV.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So, unfortunately, as much as I appreciate the carryover and how it does a nice job of kind of mostly tying up and wrapping up this Flight Log saga, Never Ever seeming to me as the weakest between the three MVs is why I dinged it so low in terms of the concept. That said, I cut it a little bit of slack again because of how I appreciate the way it ties everything else in.
Okay.
So I put it at that very steady middle ground of just
I like
a
how you're
3.
giving yourself all these caveats before you get the score. Okay.
Yes.
So
I gave it a 3.
a 3. Okay.
Even though it didn't do as great a job as I felt the other two MVs do, it was satisfactory enough, and it's an enjoyable video to watch.
Okay.
So 3.
And again, that's out of a 1 to 5 scale.
Yes.
1 being lowest, 5 being highest. So right in the middle. Pretty supermatic. So for me, I think everything you said, it's pretty much the same sentiment I have. That said, I really feel and connect with the story and the symbols that are being shown in this entire trilogy. And what I really like about Never Ever is that it's the climax. It's the entire trilogy coming together. It is the return of the king. And it's sort of the story dispelling itself into one final chapter. It's showing how from the beginning it did this, this, and this, and then here's the end. And it kind of does that all together within Never Ever. But you can't take that story of the first and the second chapter. You can't take those without having seen them previously separately.
Right.
Rather than taking it all together, Never Ever. So for me, I'm giving it a 3.5.
Oh.
So pretty close to you, actually. But just a little higher because I really like what it does to try to push the ballot and telling a story and the way they do it. I think, and this process of demystifying I found really enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I gave it a 3.5.
Okay.
Right?
Fair,
so
I can see that.
What do you think of the audio, Supermatic?
In terms of the audio, the funny thing to me is that as much as I wasn't really feeling the video so much, I'm actually really liking the song. And I think it's probably helped by the fact that since they dropped the choreography, I'm enjoying listening to the song as well as picturing doing the choreography to it. But at the same time, like choreography aside, just the song itself is interesting because the way it starts off, especially, like, not gonna lie, with those opening verse or that, like, dun, 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 that kind of tropical house feel.
Yeah.
For a split second, even though I knew I was listening to GOT7, I was like, it sounds like it could be a card song. Like, the way that the way that cards are going about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like that opening riff, that dun dun dun, before the vocals come in with Yugyeom and everyone else singing. Like,
the instrument sample sounds like it's the same from Card.
Exactly. And I mean, I do enjoy that particular style, especially since we've been seeing it prevalent lately in a lot of K-pop songs.
Yeah, more the dance hall.
Yes,
style. And I wouldn't call Never Ever dance hall.
Well,
right?
not exactly straight up.
And that's where they are different, right? Because I think, they're different tempos and slightly different styles.
Yes.
But very similar in the instruments used.
Yep. It's interesting, and at the same time, it's kind of funny to me just to see like how this trend is continuing, because we saw a lot of it towards the end of 2016, and now here in the first part of 2017, we're seeing that trend continue of these blending of styles, which is including these dance hall, tropical house, almost like kind of reggae-ish sounds and vibes.
Yeah, okay.
And me being an appreciative listener of that kind of sound, I do like Never Ever quite a bit. Maybe not like as much as some of my favorite songs, but Never Ever is still very enjoyable for me. And it's got all these interesting, like, I don't want to call it clashing, just the way that the instrumental blends all these different styles together. And then I'll admit that there are some parts vocals wise that at first I wasn't necessarily feeling. To be honest, some of the like sing rapping that some of the members do, like Jackson. Yeah. Like, I saw all the reception online. A lot of people were saying that they were almost kind of cringy, and I'm inclined to agree with that.
Yeah.
But that said, just for some reason, the more I listened to Never Ever, especially since we decided to wait a week and fully deconstruct GOT7 instead of just doing Never Ever on its own, I actually was able to listen to the song a lot more, and it grew on me from my first initial listen. So that said, originally I was going to give this like maybe just a 3 to a 3.25, but I actually am going to give it a 3.75 now because it's bumped up and it's been very enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
But that said, I think what helps is the fact that, one, I've been listening to the song a lot because I want to learn the choreography. It's fun to dance to once you see the choreography, so.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good, fair score. I think one of the other critiques that a lot of people are giving the song, especially when it first came out, was that it felt like it was all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, keeping in mind, this is the same producer who produced the other two chapters.
Yes, Ear Attack.
Ear Attack, right? So he did Fly and Hard Carry, obviously. Fly was, I feel like, emotionally vulnerable song. Hard Carry was like, let's do this. I mean, I think it was Mark or whoever the English-speaking member of GOT7 said, like, this is a game reference.
Yeah.
So he made it very clear. He's like, guys, this is about gaming. Yeah. Aside from the story narrative that's being told from the music video. So it goes hard in that sense. So we've got a lighter, emotional song, a hard, let's do this song. And lastly, we have Never Ever, which is kind of like, it's the climax. It's the pieces all coming together and it's making sense because it's like, oh, I see it now. And you hear that in the song. And when I first listened to this, like, I didn't get that at all. I was also kind of in the same spirit of all the other listeners. They're like, it's kind of all over the place. These different vocals are mishmashed into it in not a very cohesive way. But I see it now. And I see what Ear Attack was trying to do with the Never Ever. He was trying to say, this is the epiphany. This is the climax of the trilogy. Taking everything that we've learned from Your Friends Have Passed On. This is what actually happened, and this is how I feel about it from Jin Young's perspective.
Mhm.
I thought, technically speaking, there were a lot of cool things in it. I actually like the instruments that Eartech used, how aggressive he was with it, while at the same time providing the sense of closure. I thought it was cool how you hear them go, whoa, right? And Eartech employs this technique of where he cuts he mutes the whoa, and then it silences, and then he brings it back in again. I thought that was just a really nice use of muting vocals, right? And carrying it forward. But I thought it was a very nice touch in terms of making you feel like, you're bringing it to 10 and you can't take it past 10 anymore. And so you kind of like push it past the edge, the boundary, which is what we thematically see with the story. It's like it's reaching the end of the mortal life and it's bringing you all the way over to the spiritual world. And so it's bringing it together. And you hear that in the song. So for the song, am I going to be playing this in my DJ sets? Probably not as much. Not as much as the other two songs. So, Supermatic, I also gave it a 3.75.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's good, guys. Again, 1 being lowest, 5 being highest on a rubric. 3.75 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Because we're pretty critical. We very rarely give anything beyond a 4.
Yeah.
So 3.75 is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Overall,
Yep.
is it
Daebak or not?
Supermatic, I'll let you kick it off. Do the honors.
Even though I was fairly critical of both the song and the concept, it's still Daebak.
Daebak, yeah.
I like it. It's Daebak.
Yeah. For me, it's definitely Daebak. I mean, I just love how it comes together. There's a lot of thought and care put into the concept, the lyrics. What's cool is that that this is a love song, but there is another different parallel interpretation to the lyrics, right? So
Definitely.
There's one for the love song, which is if you haven't even seen the music video, if you're just listening to the song, because it turns up on Spotify or the DJ is playing it, K-pop DJs, and that's the one interpretation, right? And then there's the other parallel interpretation, which is everything that we've inherited from the concept, the music video, and that I think I really love about it, and the fact that you can have those two interpretations running in tandem is pretty fun in my opinion. And we get that actually with the other songs. We get that with Hard Carry. So Hard Carry being one very obviously written for the gaming crowd, and then the other one, well, this is for the fall. This is for falling into hell. That's what Hard Carry was about, and bringing you out of that. And so the angels bringing you out of that hell. Same thing with Fly. Fly just wanting to be with you. It could be another love song for a lover, but also wanting to be with your bros who have passed on. So
for sure.
All those parallel interpretations. Looking at the Flight Log Trilogy as a whole, and as we keep touching on, you can't look at Never Ever by itself. How would you rate the songs in the Flight Log Trilogy, first, second, third? So third, what would be your pick?
Even though it is the latest release and I'm enjoying it, I would have to put Never Ever there.
Yeah. Same. Second,
Hard Carry.
Okay, yeah, Hard Carry. And I think Hard Carry is a strong second because it was fun. It was a banger. It was a slamming track. It brought a lot of cool symbolism, a lot of cool storytelling aspects to it.
Yep.
And I love the gaming references.
Yeah, absolutely.
In it. So number one, Fly. Tell me why. Tell me why Fly was your top pick out of the trilogy.
It's amazing to me because it had been some time since I had actually watched the Fly MV, but then I went and revisited it again after we agreed we were going to do this whole dive into the saga.
Yeah.
And then watching the music video and really taking the chance to listen and truly take in every aspect of the song that I could. Overall, just as a package, it stands out to me the most between the three. Even though my personal favorite choreography, especially with me being a dancer, might be Hard Carry.
Yeah.
When it comes to the whole package and comparing each installment, Fly for Departure, Turbulence with Hard Carry, and then Arrival Never Ever, Fly just seems to me to be the most coherent and the best representative package out there. Just the way that everything comes together, and even with the music video, how I don't want to say simplistic, but with how the music video plays out, all the different things that we see, we're still able to kind of grasp and get a clear idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because like Hard Carry, Never Ever, it leaves you with a bunch of questions. I mean, you're left with some questions that Fly, but at the same time, Fly does enough where you can start forming your own answers already.
Yeah, I mean, this is why at the end of Fly, Jin Young wakes up, right? So they were able, I think, they didn't tell the whole story. They showed the beginning and the emotional tension of not being there with your buds, right?
Yep.
The feeling of your buds passing on, your bros, flying, and you falling and not connecting with them, and then waking up. So I think that's a very nicely self-contained story. For me, I would say that if you listen to the song, the audio itself, it's kind of like the overture that you would get, at the beginning of a musical. Fly is the overarching theme behind the entire trilogy, in my opinion. And while we ended with Never Ever, I would use Never Ever as the bridge, the 3/4 of the way through the narrative, and end again with Fly. That's how I would arrange it, right? If I was composing the musical or composing the movie or the score, right?
Yeah.
Because Fly is that feeling of, it's that theme that runs through the course of all three of the songs, of being separated from your guys, and these guardian angels looking over you the entire experience.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I can totally see that, and I agree with that.
Yeah, and it's funny because after I play Never Ever, every time I listen to Never Ever, I want to put on Fly again, right? Because it just wants to. I want to feel that feeling that was conveyed in Fly.
Yeah,
that,
for sure.
That Never Ever brought us to in another way, in a different way, but it brings us back to Fly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
How would you rate, the Flight Log Trilogy overall?
Overall, as a package, it's interesting to think about because you touched on it earlier. It's fun, especially for me, like just what I love about being a K-pop fan is how you can take all these different songs or sagas, these like storylines, these connections, these packages, and you can kind of like not just deconstruct them as you and I have been having so much fun doing, but also compare them to see the differences. I mean, we've got BTS out there with their whole Most Beautiful Moment in Life saga.
Yeah.
We've got other groups out there that carry on even if it's not a single story, they carry on this concept. We've got EXO out there with their whole Exolution superpowers concept. So thinking about all of that, I give GOT7 a lot of credit and their whole team and label for what they've done with this Flight Log saga.
Yeah.
I mean, at times it may not have been as clear or as powerful and provocative as, say, for example, BTS's storyline, but I like that they were able to keep their own storytelling motif, I guess is the way to put it.
Okay.
Their style, the way that they carried this out. They kept the symbols consistent. It kept things fun for us as viewers.
Yeah.
So rating the saga overall, are we using the 1 to 5 rubric?
Sure, why not?
For the Flight Log saga, especially with how they had a really great start with Fly, which I felt like was such a strong start. And then now that I'm actually taking into account all the things you had to say about Never Ever, I'm kind of looking at it now with a bit of rose-tinted glasses because I'm realizing there are things that I didn't notice or appreciate about it. Factoring that into how I would rate the saga overall, I would probably give the saga a very strong 4.
Okay.
Because, I mean, just, again, using a reference point of, like, comparing it to how we did our deep dives of BTS or even BAP or like just other groups and how they do the storytelling saga.
Yeah.
I still give the GOT7 Flight Log saga a really great shout out, and the reason why I gave it a 4 is because as much as it took some effort to dive in and deconstruct things, at the same time, after deconstructing it, I have so much more appreciation for the story they told us.
Yeah. I mean, the overall moral of the story is that just because your friends have left doesn't mean that you need to go too.
Yeah.
Right. You should carry on. Life is still worth living.
Yeah, for
and you still have become richer from the experience. While it may be tragic, you've grown more from the experience. And that's something to remember. That's the moral of the story. I think that, one can take away from the entire Flight Log trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
I still think they could have done a better job in terms of making the symbols clearer and easier. I think they made it too hard, honestly. And I think the reason why it was too hard, And I'm sorry, this is like a really good, mean critique, but I think it was just the filmmaker, the director, who wasn't keeping that continuity of the symbols strong throughout. I think we could have seen that better with the breathing, with nature, with water. I think each of those themes, and flying and air, I think each of those could have been strengthened consistently through each of the major chapters more so.
Okay.
That would have made it easier for fans to interpret and digest.
All right.
I think also making Yogyum and Jin Young the same person was a really nice artistic move. But the director could have done that in a more clear, obvious way. And I think, just because it would have been more obvious, I don't think that would have detracted from the storytelling medium or the element conveyed through it. So for me, I guess using the 1/5 scale, I'd give it a 3.
Okay.
It's still good. And I mean, I can't really think of anyone else that's really doing what they're doing, what GOT7 is doing right now in terms of using this trilogy. We've referenced BTS earlier. BTS, I think, I don't want to pit them. I don't feel like it's a fair apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
To always use BTS against GOT7 because they are trying to do slightly different things. But I don't know, man. Maybe my army bias is just coming out real strong. So I think I just really like the way that BTS has been doing that overarching narrative.
Okay.
With all that in mind, I think, there's one question that remains. And this is really, if there's one thing you've got to take away from this, guys, and this is like the most important thing to take away from this. The question is, how should we feel about Yogyum's oversized sweater? Like, was that a good move? Was that a bad move? I don't know. And it's the serious questions like Yogyum's sweater that are going to keep me up at night, really wondering, like, should we have more oversized sweaters like this in K-pop?
That'll be worth sleeping on.
Okay. Well, you guys know where to find us. We're at the Kpopcast hashtag. Where can people find you, Supermatic?
You can find me on Twitter as well as on Instagram, and soon enough my YouTube channel, which is all just under Supermatic, SOUPERMATIC.
Yeah. And I'm at DJ Peter Lowe. This is sort of a different format for us. We are, if you're listening to the audio experience, hopefully I've edited it to a way where it's a cohesive narrative story. Right now we are periscoping ourselves with the raw behind the scenes thing. And I'm wondering if it's distracting us from our storytelling medium of doing the audio only experience. We're going to be putting this up on YouTube, I think. I'm not sure how I feel about putting this audio feed of us recording on YouTube, but we do have a YouTube channel. And right now it's just the audio stuff. But if you want to relive the entire GOT7 Flight Log Trilogy experience, just look for Kpopcast on YouTube. I think we'll pop up and you can see the playlist that we created so that you can watch the Flight Log Trilogy in chronological order, relive the entire saga, knowing what you know now from this podcast. If there are other questions, things that you think we missed, I'm sure there probably is, let us know. And we'll continue that conversation.
Yeah, for
Hashtag Kpopcast.
Yep.
Okay, so I think that's it for this episode. Thanks for enduring this long episode, and we'll be back next week, I think, with shorter reviews.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone for sticking with us so far, and take care until next time.
All right, see ya. And GOT7 fans, while I may have compared you against BTS, I'm never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna round around and desert you, never gonna make you cry, never gonna make you say goodbye, and never tell a lie and hurt you.